Okay, I think we are all good. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to this Product People event. Before we start, a quick reminder our events are streamed on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. All talks are recorded and saved on YouTube, so feel free to check out any sessions you might have missed. But however, a perk of joining the sessions live is that you can share your own insights and ask questions via Slido. So you can here scan the QR code for joining our Slido, or just go to slido.com and enter this code. So today's session is about from pointless roles to purposeful teams, rethinking product roles, and will be presented to us by Hugo Frost, who is the head of product and co-founder in Finova. Before I hand it over to Hugo, let me briefly introduce myself and Product People. My name is Ahmet. I am an associate product manager consultant at Product People and your host today. I have a background in computer science, product development, and product management, and I recently joined Product People. And for those who don't know us, Product People provide interim product management and product leadership through our 40 product managers. We also run one of the largest PM communities in Europe with more than 60,000 members. This is how we give back to the community. So, before I hand it over to our speaker, we'd love to get to know you a little better. Please go to our Slido link and answer this short question. You can simply scan the QR code, as I said, on the screen, or visit slido.com and enter the code 1063910 to join. This will help us better understand your perspective. So the question is, um, what is the value your role brings to the team? Help translate the user needs, advocate for the business, help maintain quality and consistency, bring value to the customers. I will give you a couple of seconds to answer. And while waiting for your answers, if I think about it personally, I'd honestly say I would struggle to choose between option A and option D, because helping translate user needs and bringing value to customers are both crucial, but they are strongly connected. Because when you clearly understand what user need, you are in a much better position to deliver meaningful value that really makes an impact. So let's wait for the answers. So yeah, results are in, and bring value to the customers are ahead in a really, really long distance. 100%. Everyone select this this answer. Okay. So thank you for participating. And without further ado, I am happy to welcome Hugo Froze. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to hear your approach to product roles. But first, we'd love to hear a bit about you. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Well, I do a brief presentation within my presentation, so there's a slide I'll skip. But right now, I'm working as a consultant and advisor, helping product leaders to consider, think about how their organization functions and trying to help it optimize it to bring that value to the customers that everybody said 100%, right? Well, how do we bring more value to the customers while bringing that value to the business as well? And it's about trying to figure that out. And coming from a product ops background, design background, now I work mostly with product leaders, product design and leaders in helping reach the best they can. And I'm here to help other people. If your team needs it as well, please let me know. So let's pick up, right? So number one, today we're going to be talking about purposeful teams over pointless roles. And it's interesting because there's a lot of debate going on right now, about what roles mean, what they don't, who's important, is AI going to take my job? And I thought it was important to bring up this conversation. Hopefully the audience feel the same thing, right? So firstly, as I was saying, I'm based out of Portugal right now. I've got over 25 years as a design and product. I'm also the co-host of the Thoughts Unraveled podcast with Chris Compston. And right now, I'm helping and consulting leaders in the product world. In terms of the question, to get started, the question that changes everything, right? And this is the question that I keep hearing more and more often, right? Do we really need all these product managers, for example? This is the one that started me on this journey and the one that started me thinking about it, because we started hearing about it. We heard certain CEOs of companies talking about how product managers weren't needed and how they dropped the whole role completely. We heard other people saying product managers are no longer needed, it's a pointless role, and that kind of stuff. And so I really want to get into that today. So naturally, what we have a tendency of doing is going to our defensive mode, right? Which is, for a PM, we could coordinate everything, for example, right? These are some of the phrases that come out. For researchers, research prevents us from building the wrong things. And QA engineers, for example, right? These are three roles that have been questioned, which is like, for example, a QA. Without QA, bugs ship to customers, so I'm stopping bugs from going. The problem here is that when we're defending our necessity, it usually means we've already lost the argument, right? And here we're going against the current, we're going against, someone's already made a decision to an extent, and we're trying to argue that they shouldn't it shouldn't drop this role, that they should keep us, that we bring value. And we're already in this defensive mode. Now, the uncomfortable truth is, and I'm going to keep it very simple, right? And please bear with me, have a bit of patience, but the truth of the matter is that most of the roles aren't actually needed to build products. If we think really objectively about the situation, we don't need these roles to build a product. And that's perfectly okay. And this is where I want the shift to change in how people think about it. Now, if we're thinking about building an actual product, and even this is with a grain of salt, right? We need an engineer to build it, and we need a designer to make it usable. But considering the new AI systems, considering how things evolve, we might not even need both these roles. In some cases, there are designers who are able to now develop products. There are engineers who can do a lot of the design stuff using lovables and that kind of stuff. So even these roles, we can almost argue that they aren't needed, right? Now, this isn't to say, right? Before we go on, this is the thing. This is the baseline. We need these areas. We need these roles. We don't need any of the other roles, right? Need is the word I'm focusing on. But a quick reflection that I'm going to ask everyone to think about is, what would happen if your role didn't exist didn't exist for 6 months? Taking a good hard reflection at your current role that you're working in, what would happen if your role didn't exist for 3 months? In some cases, we might question a few things, but we'll come back to this, right? We'll come back to this point. Now, moving on, we've all been told that we need to hire and we need to structure teams in a specific way, right? And we've heard about it. We've heard about the product trio. We've heard about the packs, where we've got product managers, engineering manager, we've got a designer. These are the basic three that we have to have in every single pack or team or whatever. Then we've got a couple of engineers. Then ideally, we might have a data analyst. Maybe it's divided with another team. We still have a data analyst. We've got a researcher that can help us to research the stuff we need, right? This is what they tell us is the right team. And this is what we've been being told by people over the past 5 to 10 years, right? But the truth of the matter is, just because we don't need these roles, and that's the truth of the matter is, we don't need those roles, but that doesn't mean they don't add tremendous value. And this is the point I want to make, right? What we need to focus on is the value that these roles can bring. And so I'm not saying that we don't need those roles. The basic need, we don't need them, but they do bring a lot of value. Now, what that means is it shifts our way of looking at these roles. We don't think about it as, I have to build the right team, right? I have to build the right pack according to the Spotify model or some other model that I saw online or in a great book that I read. We have to focus on the value. Now, what we think about these roles, it's similar to an amplifier, right? And the image is an amplifier to kind of show this. The product roles, what they do is, they don't create the actual music, right? If we use the example of an amplifier, but they make the sound infinitely better, right? What'll happen is, using the case of the amplifier, if it's just playing, the music is very no sound, it's very flat, it's very, low key. If we had an amplifier, we're suddenly immersed in the sound. It's all around us. It makes it so much better. And that's what a lot of these roles can bring to the product organization. The problem is that everybody's questioning that because we've overinflated how these teams and how these organizations have to be built. So rather than asking the question when we're thinking about it this way is, do we need this role? And this is the problem, right? I would say we can't approach it this way. We have to look at it in the question of what value does this role bring to our specific situation? And that's how we should think about structuring and building our teams. For example, let's say someone turns around and says, as a PM, yes, we coordinate everything and manage stakeholders, right? If you look at this, someone will turn around and say, well, almost anyone else on the team could do this. This doesn't seem like something that I need the specific person just to do. Whereas if you turn around and you say, our product manager identified the highest impact feature that increased conversion by 15% while reducing development by 30%. This translated to 200K yearly revenue increase and 500K savings in development costs. The big points here are the 200K, the 500K. Anyone looking at that will say, I see the value of this. It makes us stronger, right? If we look at, for example, researcher, right? UX researchers help prevent us from building the wrong thing because they will do the research, they will validate what a user needs, what a customer needs, and we'll avoid building the wrong thing. Whereas if we look at it in this phrase of this research insight helped us pivot our approach and saved 3 months of development. Now, if we put a number next to that 3 months of development, thinking about an engineering team, right, between 500 and a million, 500K to a million per year that we're paying for them, if we save 3 months of development, we're saving a pretty penny for the organization as well, right? Again, it makes us stronger. It's about the value we brought to the organization, to the team, to the structure. 3 practical actions when we're thinking about this the next time we're looking at our roles and what this needs. And we'll go into each of these, right? I'll go into each of these in more detail. But for example, number 1, look at what is your current value. What is the value you're bringing to your team? What is the value you're bringing to your organization? And what's the value you're bringing to the customers? Collect impact stories, not task lists. If you turn around and you say, oh, you know what? I have meetings with stakeholders. I have stand-ups with the team. I'm doing... That's worthless. It's pointless, right? We know it's important for how the team functions, but it's pointless for the people who make the decisions about the value of the role. And if you're hiring for these roles, we have to question how we hire differently, right? We can't just look and say, I have to build a pack or a team in this specific way. We have to look and think, how do we actually create a team that brings value and everyone on that team is bringing the right amount of value? Now, if we look at the auditing the current value, right? Look at the work from the last quarter, for example. What outcomes can directly tie to my work, right? What impact did I create? And if you can't find any specific outcomes, you have to start questioning, have I been approaching the work the right way? Have I been doing things correctly, right? If I can't attach my work to an outcome, maybe I've been wasting my time, right? And it's something for us to question ourselves. What would have been different if I hadn't been here? Right? If I hadn't been part of this team, if I hadn't organized it, what negative impact would it have had? If we can't answer something there, something concrete there, we have to also again question, what have I been doing? And lastly, what specific decisions changed because of my input, right? And this is important because you drove something, you ideally showed an impact, and the outcomes don't always have to be monetary, but they should have some kind of impact for the business, for the organization, something that we see, or for the users, right? Then collect impact stories. This is an important part, right? We want to start collecting these. And I've spoken to a few folks who are really good at this, which is whenever they finish a project where they're super proud of, where something happened, they've got a journal. And they just write it down, right? So start collecting these little tidbits, because in 6 months, you won't remember the details of that project. But if you do it today, you still remember all those details, and it's great. Just put it in a quick notepad. What was the work I did? How was I involved? What did I do? What specific things did I do that I thought created impact? What was the outcome of this work, right? Just simple little bullet points to keep yourself reminded of what this is. And it's always great when you're reflecting, even when you're going for your next job, you've got great stories to be able to tell, right? So it's always useful. And then lastly, when we're thinking about hiring for these roles, right? Before we actually start adding new roles, we have to ask this question: What specific value gap are we trying to fill? It's not because I have to have a PM. It's not because I have to have a designer. It's because there's a specific impact that they will bring to the team that will create a difference, right? How will I measure whether this role is successful? And that's the thing. We have to be able to put a number, some kind of number, and it doesn't have to be a monetary number, but there has to be some kind of number, some kind of outcome, some kind of successful point where we can turn around and say, this team, this person brought impact, or this role brought impact to the organization. If we hire a person without that in mind, we're setting them up to fail, and it's our fault. It's not their fault, right? We want to know what impact they will create. What outcomes do we expect to be different based on that person being hired, right? What change do I want to make? Because it's also a great way for you to set expectations for those people you're going to be hiring. And that way they also know what they're getting themselves into. So when you're building out these teams, think about this. So going back to this question, what would happen if your role didn't exist for 3 months, right? And look, I've had roles myself where I looked and I said, you know what, if I hadn't been here, or if you leave, you kind of feel things still work. And, that's a good way to reflect and think to yourself, you know what, if they're still working, if things are still functioning, if nothing broke down, maybe I wasn't doing the best job I could be doing, or maybe I wasn't bringing the value I thought I was bringing. Maybe I have to look for a place where I can bring more value. Or you look and you can say, you know what, I'm seeing I'm not bringing the value I expected I would be giving. What shift do I have to make in the way I'm approaching things, right? Or do I have to challenge someone in a leadership level to tell them, folks, I'm not, the opportunities aren't being created for me to create the impact I think I can bring. So how can I do that, right? And trying to force that, because sometimes in certain organizations, they also don't set us up for this. The most powerful teams, and this is one thought I want everyone to remain with, is the most powerful teams aren't ones with the right roles. And this is important, right? And I've brought it up various times. We can't go on the defensive and saying, oh, because we always build teams with a PM, with an engineering manager, with a designer, and with engineers. And we have it's not about that. It's the ones where the role brings undeniable value. And there are teams where PM might not be needed. There are teams where a designer might not be needed, or where an analyst might not be needed. In some cases, some of the roles together can actually jump up and help each other, right? And so, for example, I've seen it where an engineering manager and a product designer can do a lot of the stuff that many PMs are doing. Not that they can do it incredibly well because they're focused, but they can do enough that it gets by. In other cases, it's a very technical area. Maybe it doesn't need a designer. In some cases, there might be teams or packs that go for months that they don't need a researcher, and we've assigned the researcher full time to them. It's a pointless waste of a role and a person, right? So we have to think about these things as we're thinking about the organizations. It's with AI even more so, right? Because we have to physically think about, where does AI augment the team, where does it affect negatively, and how do we structure the teams best built to both use AI and bring value. That's it from me for now. I'm actually looking more forward to the Q&A if there are any questions out there, because I want the discussion to start opening up the discussion. But if you want to call me and you think it'd be interesting, to set up a discovery call for us to work together, please scan the QR code. And also, if you want to know about the book I'm writing together with Chris Compston and Ezra Yetis about making the product shift, which is changing the way we focus on how product organizations are structured and how they work. And it's taking a lot of the work that's already been done around the operating models, but it's looking beyond that, right? About how effectively do we actually make that shift, not just think about it, and it's not as conceptual. How do we make it more concrete? And that's it from me.
It was an awesome presentation. And as a musician, I really liked your metaphor between product persons and amplifiers. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll now start the QA session. Please head to Slido again and submit any questions you have for the Hugo. And while you draft your questions, I'll share a few more slides about product people. So We are typically invited to join teams as interim product managers or product leaders, as product coaches or consultants to upskill product management or operation teams, and to accelerate transformation in the teams. And here are some B2C clients we have worked with before. And also you can see some B2B clients as well. And finally, here are some case stats about our company. We have supported over 690 teams, and there are 40 product leaders and product managers in our team. And we are proud to say that both of our team and leadership are around 60% female. And yeah, thank you for listening again. So now I already see some questions. So yes, Hugo. Instead of roles, would it be more interesting to talk about skills?
Yes, it is. It probably is the best way to approach things, right? The problem is, and that's why I approached this little presentation. That's why I started this whole thing, is because a lot of people are questioning their roles. And the thing here I wanted to focus on was that, a lot of these roles, we're too focused on the conversation of my role is needed. I'm important, right? And I've spoken to people in PM roles and research and design and everything, and everybody turns around and they basically describe their role as the huge game changer that will change everyone's world and all that. And it's like, folks, take a step back, right? It's about the value. It's about the skill set you bring to the table. It's about figuring this out. In some cases, we need PMs because the designers and the engineers aren't mature enough. But in other cases, they might be mature enough and a PM might be too much, depending on the size and maturity of the organization, right? But also, for example, there are some people who do not get business acumen, and a PM is seriously needed there because they understand that part about the business, how it all fixes and impacts the organization. And they're really good at keeping people, functioning, working in the right direction and not losing sight of the bigger things. So it is that skill set. And that's the thing. You can get these skills across different roles, and people can build that up. So I do think the skills part is good. But when we go looking for the skills we're going to build up, we generally think about, I think I've got the profile of a product manager. I think I've got the profile of a product designer or an engineer or whatever, right? And the idea is that you then maybe complement that with some extra skills. So yes, we can focus on the skills, but the roles also exist as well. We can't just drop them completely, right? Don't know if I answered the question properly. Please reach out to me if you haven't.
That makes perfect sense, I think. Thanks for the answer. And we have one more question. Impact stories are great, especially when they are about leading indicators of overall success, product success.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? We have this assumption that only those big bang items that created huge, press releases and that everybody remembers across the organization are the stories we have to keep in mind. But sometimes we don't all have the privilege of being on those great projects, right? On those great pieces of work. And so I think the impact can be so many things, right? There's two things that are mostly important, right? One is, how do we make more money, or how do we save money, right? If you can in some way show one of those two things, infinitely, it's a lot more impact and a lot more value than turning around and saying, oh, we got everybody together in a room to ideate a solution. And you're like, I don't care about that, right? I mean, it's not that it's not important, right? Because we know we get great impact from there. And we working on the teams, we know there's huge impact in ideation. We know there's huge impact in alignment, right? In doing prioritization, all the stuff. The problem is that for the people who make the decisions, they have to look and say, you know what, I trust this product organization because they brought the value I was expecting from them. Right. And that's what we have to bring them. And sometimes it's small little things, it's incremental, but if they see that change, they see that impact. And sometimes it's things that aren't sexy at all, but they created tons of savings, or customers just, started converting a lot. That brings value. That brings a lot of value. And we have to keep those in mind as well.
Definitely. Thanks for the answer. And one more question. What advice would you give to someone who's applying for product manager roles but struggling to land a job?
Yeah. This is a hard one because the market is going through a lot of shifts right now, right? I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going through a lot of shifts. It's a very strange situation right now. Tons of people are questioning, and what we're seeing is a lot of people who are getting hired are at more senior roles, right? Because it seems that the more junior or mid-level roles, people are having challenge. Do we hire for this? In fact, there are some, Silicon Valley teams that are even reducing the amount of product managers that they have, right? For a group of people, right? And so you've got these 40 people teams growing up. You've got more mature product people overlooking these teams and this kind of stuff. All of this, it's a challenging time. I'm not saying it isn't, right? The thing is, it's about finding the right opportunities. And sometimes we have to think outside of the box, right? Sometimes it's about building our own thing. It's about throwing ourselves into the middle of a startup that will give us the opportunity to learn fast and break things and make mistakes, but also develop and build a lot of skill set really quickly. It's just looking for these opportunities left, right, and center to build up the maturity, because it's crazy, but I feel like there's suddenly this need where people want people with 10 years of experience after they've just started working. And it's like, how do you build up that experience? Look for situations where the iterations are quick, where the changes are constant, right? Startup worlds, startup hubs, that kind of stuff, building your own stuff. What happens is, because it's constantly changing, it's a great school to build up this experience in a shorter time. Whereas if you go into an enterprise organization, unless they've got the infrastructure to support you, you're going to take longer to learn, right? Because they put you in a nice little corner. They're protecting you because you're still learning and everything like that. The problem is that you're not put in the deep end. And so you're not pushed and driven to learn as quickly as they would, in other organizations and startups and stuff like that. But it's not an easy one, right? I know tons of people have been for months looking, then suddenly an opportunity showed up. Also, open your mind up to looking at things that might be almost a parallel track. It's interesting, but there are parallel tracks. I mean, there's things like program management, there's project management type jobs, things like that. Sometimes it seems like a crazy parallel track, but it builds up expertise that you can then bring to product management, right? So, it's about figuring out what works, and I'm not going to say there's an answer to that, unfortunately.
Great insights, I think. And we have one more question to related to this topic. I think you already gave lots of answer and insight for this question, but what do you think about transitioning career to product manager? Is still a good is it still a good job to invest for the future? I think you already gave the answer, but would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think to that question, right? I think it is still a very valuable job to have, right? And a very valuable thing to do. The only thing that I'm concerned of, and that's one of the things that worries me, is what I'm seeing is they're expecting much more experienced people to transition to product management bit by bit, right? Rather than expecting someone at an entry level or at a mid level to go into product management job. They're looking at more senior people to go into that. So anybody going into there who hasn't built up transferable skills that are worthwhile and that can bring them value, right? It's going to be harder. And building up that product knowledge, for example, we'll start seeing more and more potential design leaders or experienced designers, experienced engineers maybe moving into that role. It's a very strange time. I still can't tell what tomorrow's going to be like, but I'm like I said, it's one of those things where you look and they say, as a baseline, what do people usually hire for, right? Someone who can build their product, and the people who actually build the product are the designers and the engineers, right? And even designers, some people will turn around and say, an engineer can do most of the front end stuff anyway, and so we don't even need a designer. So all the rest of it is extra value that we bring, but only if the organization sees that value, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one more question comes. I believe AI gives every role the license to branch out, not 100%, not all the time. Then executive in fields that are not overly specified in their role. With all the changes driven by the current AI wave, is the difficulty in landing a PM role mainly due to the job market or a skills gap?
So there's almost two points here, right? One is obviously AI is giving us tons of new capabilities, new things we can do. It's optimizing how we work. The problem is that people don't seem to be working less because of it, right? What I just see is that people are working more and producing more in shorter times. Unfortunately, this is the big problem, which is That doesn't mean they're bringing more value. It means that they're pushing out more crap more quickly, right? So that's one point, and we have to be very specific about that, which is just because we can build things fast and we can build more things, it doesn't mean we should, right? And that's where a PM has to have their head on straight and be able to push back and say, this is great, but does it actually bring any value? And we have to question that. The last one, the second one around the difficulty landing PM jobs is mainly due to the job market or skills gap. That's a good question, right? I have an opinion, which is I think AI is being used as an excuse. I think that most product organizations during the golden era where there were, the market was flooded, there were tons of roles, everybody could get a job in product and it was growing exponentially, right? I think the problem is most product organizations hired too many people, right? And they built too big an organization. What happens is they then realize that they didn't need all those people. And this is where we go back to what I was saying before, right? It's the value that those roles are all bringing. And you reach the conclusion when you look at it and you say, I've got packs that are incrementally moving things 0.05% every single quarter, right? You look and you think, oh, that's a lot of money for just such a small incremental change, And so you can obviously turn around and say, I probably don't need that pack, right? These small things, it's because it's our fault, right? We've built the wrong types of organizations. We've built the wrong types of ways of working, the wrong types of thinking and prioritizing about the work because we just could throw people at it. And so people I think they're using AI as an excuse. I don't think it's AI that's taking our jobs. I think it's bad decisions that were made in the past, right? Because the truth of the matter is, if you were still bringing value, they would turn around and say, okay, you just keep bringing value. Now you add AI to it in most cases, right? It is an excuse. I do think, however, there is this thing where we're going to bring in AI to solve everything, to be more efficient, be more effective, solve our problems and everything like that. And the problem is they haven't actually thought about the long-term impact, right? And you've seen it. Many of those organizations have now gone back. They're now having to hire people. There's now roles for people who will come in and fix your AI stuff you've built, right? And that kind of stuff. So I think we're going through extremes, right? Which was one time, oh no, AI will solve everything. Then there'll be a point where it's like, oh no, everyone's against AI, or potentially, I'm exaggerating, but we'll go through various extremes until we find the balance, right? And I think we're going through that transition. That's why it seems so hard for us. It's a technological revolution, right? Much like the Industrial Revolution. There's a huge shift in how we work and how we think about how we, even the regulation around how AI, how salaries are handled, how people are supported, even if they don't have jobs, all this stuff. There's tons of discussion. And I think we haven't reached that point yet because, people are just thinking, oh, how can we be more efficient? And it's like, that's great. But like I said, number one, right, you're pushing more AI stuff out. And on top of that, if AI is trained on the code that exists right now in the market, let's be honest, a lot of the code that exists out there isn't incredible. So a lot of the products it's going to be building aren't going to be incredible, right? And this is, so people assume, oh no, it's going to take everyone's job and everything. I was like, no, you're going to need an engineer, right? So you're going to need an engineer to go through all that code. You're going to need, I've been playing around with Claude Code, and I use this example a lot, and I have been coding something. But the amount of times I have to keep reminding it to think about the basic heuristics of usability. I have to go looking at accessibility. I keep asking it to think about, again, semantic coding, all that kind of stuff. I just have to keep reminding it, hold on, you've forgotten about this, you've forgotten about that, right? Refactor something because this code looks like it's terrible. You've added layers and it's becoming confusing. And it's like, Claude Code is always telling me, you're right. I'd forgotten about that. But it takes a lot of work, right? You can't assume that it's going to build everything for you and all that kind of stuff. So look, I'm on two ends here, right? I think it's not just about the AI. I think it's also about this reflection about how product organizations have been built. And that's a big change that's happening. But the truth of the matter is we also have to go through the stage where it seems like AI is the solution for everything. And people have to figure out what is the actual best way of working together, right? And some teams are doing it well. Some teams are doing it not so well.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And since you mentioned that you have used Claude AI, we have a question. Which AI tools are you currently using?
Oh, I actually have about 5 tabs open. So I'm using Gemini, I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using Claude, I've tested Lovable. I'll have to be honest, it seemed great the first time I tried it. Did not like having to do any iterations on it, and so I actually stopped using Lovable. using Claude. I'm using also Perplexity. I'm testing them all out, right? And so I'm seeing which one works for what, and I've been testing out each one of them through various things. But for example, tons of my tasks that I do, I've managed to optimize and automate them. So stuff that I would spend days on, now I spend literally 1 to 2 hours, if so much, right? It was boring stuff anyway, so I automated myself.
Yeah, that's genius. That's genius. By the way, is there any specific reasons that why didn't you like Lovable?
Why didn't I like Lovable? So what Lovable does is, I love that you go in there, you have a conversation with it, you present something, and then something happens where you see something visual, and you almost fooled into thinking it's incredible. I've got a product. I can now dish this out. I can push this out into the market, right? But in my case, I went in there and I gave it a prompt and it presented something, and I was like, okay, this is great, but what you've forgotten is, this is a very superficial look. Let's iterate on this. Let's build on it, right? Because that's how iteration goes. We test something, we see how it works, and we evolve it. And every iteration I would give it, it would start breaking down, and those things wouldn't work properly. And then it would start having some confusion. Now, I know, and look, I've seen this from other people doing the same experiment. If you do a really great prompt and go through all those details in the beginning, it produces some really incredible stuff, right? But in my case, I'm the type of person who likes to iterate and, learn and evolve. And with something, for me, it didn't work. It was a challenge. With Claude Code, I can do much more. It does the same thing. So funny thing is, Claude, people don't associate Claude with that, but if I ask it to, it does UI as well, right? It does all the design, it does the front end. I can ask it to do, and I can bring up usability issues, user experience stuff, and it does it for me. I've been enjoying using Claude Code.
Yeah,
There's a difference between browser Claude and Claude Code, right? I started off on the browser, and Teresa Torres was sharing somewhere and says, "Oh, but you have to try Claude Code." She was trying on LinkedIn, and I was like, "But isn't it the same thing?" And when I started using Claude Code, I was like, "No, this is totally different. This opens up a whole new avenue of things to do." So, I've been testing out multiple things, but it's great. But for example, there's simple little things, little tasks you have, even personal tasks that you do, or things that you want to organize and control your life. You can now build it, right? I did a talk a month ago at Productized, and one of the things I did was I was trying to present the principles first approach, and I was just like any other presentation. You're getting to the end of it, and you're thinking people are going to go away with this concept I've tried selling, and I'm going to, people just forget about it 2 weeks afterwards, right? So what I did was, together with Claude, I created an actual canvas that people could then interact with and then download their own principles first approach to use in their organization. So people could actually do an exercise and apply what I was talking about in the talk. It was just a simple interactive way of people being more active with things. So I think it is an amplifier for sure.
yeah, good answer. And we have one last question. If you would recommend 2 books about product management, what would they be?
2 books.
Yep.
Only 2. So, I mean, obviously for me, one of the big books I love, and it's because it's practical, it's very direct, it's about very connected to the reality of the day to day. I love The Escaping the Build Trap by Melissa Perri, right? I love that. And a strange one I like, look, don't get me wrong, I love the Marty Kagan books, I love Teresa Torres books. But for me, one I actually love is the Sprint book from Google Ventures, the Google Sprint book. Because what I love is it's not that you have to apply Google sprints to, design sprints to every single thing that you want to do or anything like that. But what I love is the way they teach you how to just be very practical in how you structure your way of thinking about the people involved in each step of the process, how each step of that process has a purpose, a function. And the book is so well structured in that sense that for me, I think it's actually a great book because it teaches you about the practicality of there's a lot of fluff, but there's a purpose. Every single step, everything I do, there's a purpose, there's an outcome, there's something that comes out of it. Thinking about how the right people you have to have in the room to make a decision, how, move things forward. For me, that's a really good book, actually.
Noted down. Thank you. And I know I said last question, but we have one more follow-up question regarding to AI tools. Do you have a specific example for a task you talked about that is now done in some hours with AI?
Yeah. So one is one pages, right? I don't do one pages anymore, at least the baseline. What I did was I created a simple thing where it looks at example one pages I've got that I've created. It looks at also the language I use, my tone and everything. And then what happens is, and this is there's a baseline. And then what I do is I go in there and I give a brief description of what I wanted to think on, the topic I wanted to think on, and I describe how I'm thinking or some of the principles or logic I'm thinking about it, and it creates a draft one pager for me. Then I go into the one page and I edit a few things. But as it's doing right now, it's about 60 to 70% of the way there. So it saves me a lot of time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. By the way, we are keep getting questions. Would you like to keep continue
Let's
or?
go. Let's go. I love when the discussions keep going. This is the best
Okay,
part.
excellent. So another question: how can I efficiently step into a product manager role in an early stage company?
It depends. Don't you love this word, this phrase? Everybody uses this so much. It actually gets tiring sometimes, but it does depend greatly, right? It depends on the situation. So if you are already in that early stage company, your approach will be different to if you're trying to get into an early stage company at this stage, right? For example, if you are already in that company, sometimes what we have to do, and this is what I tell people, right? If you know the playground where you can play around or where you can do stuff, it's about figuring out how you can show that you can do that work and the value it will bring. And sometimes you have to do extra work, right? So you might spend a bit of extra hours every night trying to do something. I remember having to do when I was trying to show user experience. I would spend every night I would leave the office and then I would spend up until 10, 11 o'clock every night doing learning, looking at stuff, testing out stuff, things like that, to be able to show to my managers the next day, right? And that's sometimes what we have to do. We just have to show those people that, number one, we're the right person for that role. Number two, the impact it would bring by having us in that role in the organization, right? And so look for those levers, look for those important things. If we're trying to get into an early stage company, this is the type of thing where it's a bit harder because a founder will always think that they're the product person on the team. They will think that they know their product, that they think that, and so there, I think it's about trying to get to know some of these folks, trying to get to have, and it's like I say, there's nothing more powerful than scheduling a coffee with someone without without expecting something from that coffee. Right. The only expectation is I want to know what's going on. I want to pick your brain. I want to learn from you, that kind of stuff. Most people are generally happy to have that coffee with us. But from there, what happens is they get to know us, right? They start having a conversation with us. They start seeing how we think. And they start seeing, oh, wait, there's an opportunity. I like this way this person is working and everything. And even if we feel comfortable and if we feel there's been an openness, we can turn around and say, you know what? Actually, hearing you talk, I saw that I think it just came to me now. I mean, you can lie a bit, right? But you can say, it just came to me now. I think there's a way I think, that maybe I could bring impact to your organization. Would it be okay if I sent over something, a proposal or something like that? And, like I said, potentially 95% of the time, they'll turn around and say, oh, you know what? I don't really need anyone right now, or no, we're cool with that. But we just need that 5%, right? And that 5% is an opening. And sometimes we do that. So there's multiple ways we can do that. And sometimes it's just about taking the risk. It's like I said, the nose is always guaranteed, right? So why not risk it?
Yeah. And I think this concludes our QA session. I don't see any more questions for now. And thank you very much, Hugo, for sharing these insights with us. And I really enjoyed your presentation and answers you gave. And to our audience, also, thank you for listening. If you'd like to stay connected, please scan the QR code here to subscribe to our newsletter for more inspiring product stories and insights. And also, if you enjoyed this talk, please join us again on December 2nd when we'll be talking about the Stoic Product Manager with Begona. And yeah, thank you for joining and see you next time.